We'd like to introduce our other speaker. Rick Lemberg works for a company called SQL Stream, and they specialize in the area of big data, Internet of Things type of topics. But one of their great claims to fame is the ability to do real-time traffic analytics, traffic management. And to speak about that, I give you Rick Lemberg. Rick?
Well, hello. Thanks, Ralph.
Span our camera.
There we go. Certainly, everything that Jamie was discussing is pertinent to the world that we live in building smart cities. What we're involved in is the combination of different technologies, streaming and using our stream processor together with groups like Oracle and the big databases and predictive capabilities in order to set the foundation for a smart city that can then be expanded rationally in a way that makes sense. We're in a brave new world. It's something we liken to the Wild West. We've sort of had the Wild West out here in the old days with the gold rush and the Barbary Coast, and certainly the same sort of thing with the birth of Silicon Valley and what we went through decades ago. And I'm seeing the same thing again today. It's really an exciting time where the old players, the core group that have been participating in this sort of massively complicated technology are still playing and doing what we do best, setting up a level playing field for new methodologies to come in and form agile ways to get done what Jamie was actually referring to, the idea of putting it all together in a way that gets things done fast and sets the stage to fulfill the promise of technology for a smart city, which is to make people's lives truly easier, faster, better, in ways that are intuitive, so that the technology isn't the driving force. It's the needs of society that are the driving force for a smart city. And what I'm getting at is what we just came from, very exciting times. Just came back from Australia, and they're running a substantial, I love this term, hackathon. The idea that governments are now serving as the sponsors and the deep thinking organizations that fund what is called a hackathon. I think if we took a poll 5 years ago and asked would government be the innovative thinkers that would be stimulating this kind of process, I don't know that we would have necessarily seen this coming, but it's the truth of what we're going after today. I like to think ahead that the ponderous methodologies we've used in the past and still are in use today, the RFP, the RFI, this process where it takes hundreds of pages for what I like to refer to as the core players, typically to fill out forms. How are we going to build an app? How are we going to deploy something? Throw a few million, maybe 3-4 million at it. 2-3 years later, you end up with one interesting deployment, may or may not be integrated with the rest of the world. That challenge that Jamie referred to is one of the key difficulties in getting a smart city put together. This new hackathon methodology, it's in its infancy, and I'm sure it'll grow and change and evolve as time goes on, but it's working. And for those of you who don't live in hackfests every weekend like some of us are starting to do now, this is exciting stuff. The idea that instead of just filling out forms and looking at something being deployed in a year, that you bring in talent, that government will sponsor an event that could be a couple of days, could be a couple of months, where Agile development groups, university stars, postgraduate experts, the old line industry pros, along with independent developers, come together and compete with the idea that instead of having a single application that, as Jamie referred to, would end up being siloed, and I think this is one of the biggest risks we all face, is that as governments develop their smart cities, there's a lot of this going on, a lot of concern about sharing that data openly with other agencies and with other teams who are trying, in many cases, to accomplish the same thing. You bring together these hackathon-type events where then you've got 100 agile development teams, maybe between 30 and 50 teams 150 people competing over a short period of time with a level playing field, with a stream processor, with a database, with all the stored data, with a predictive component, all fully integrated, creating a level playing field for them to participate. And then what comes out of it? Dozens of different parallel applications, all with a simple central theme for this event that can then be chosen. First of all, winners that will be deployed, and then the users of these applications end up being the final arbiter of what makes sense, what gets deployed and used. A true smart city doesn't have rich or poor. It's going to be a creation that's always going to evolve, that's going to benefit everyone that participates. Every citizen has to draw benefit from it. This methodology, this agile methodology we're seeing today, sponsored by governments, and I truly believe this will extend to the private sector in ways that we're just beginning to see how it's going to happen. But with the idea that certainly anyone who's involved with control systems can see that having a competition where multiple fully integrated solutions are created and deployed together can set the foundation for the growth of not just smart city, but getting ahead of what's coming. We have to be able to integrate this into smart states. I love the term city-state that came up earlier. In many ways, that's what we're looking at, is the independent cities who are creating these kinds of deployments having a necessity to combine their data silos together to create a smart state, smart nation, and eventually a smart world that has integrated solutions that we know, even today, most of what we see will be a dinosaur in a decade or two. We know we're going to be bombarded with sensors.
Rick, let me interrupt you there for a second.
Sure.
I'd like for you to address the solution that you've developed for Sydney, Australia, and the province of New South Wales.
Sure. Well, I've actually been at SQL Stream for 7 years, and we've done, I think, 60-odd projects out there with the government's agencies of Australia alone. And it's followed this path where initially we capture sensor data from, I'm going to get stuck between data and data between Australia and the US, from myriad sources, being able to combine data from the traffic lights, from moving GPS in bus systems and in freight vehicles, fleet vehicles that are monitored by the government, from loop detectors, any kind of real-time feed, join these streams and deploy individual and combined sets of solutions that will enable this sort of consolidation of solution sets as they're created. And through that, we've been able to develop a real-time traffic system that becomes a joy for the analysts within government and externally, who are able to see what does the solution contain and what does it enable, and then being able to offshoot that. And the great thing about transportation is all different agencies have some form of transportation hub that they have to deal with. And so transportation, though you mentioned it being one of the, maybe the 6th largest area of the sensor world you're dealing with currently at Oracle, is actually one of the shared areas that almost every industry and every agency has at least some component in, that ends up being the foundation for the combination of data silos and the creation of a smart city.
I think in the world of traffic management, every second counts. The sooner you can get to work, the more productive you are, the more productive the region is. It's really a quotient, or a part of the formula at least, for what is a smart city, smart mobility, and the economic development of a region. Jamie, I have a question for you before we run out of time. Where will SF Park go? It seems like it's expandable, and one of the things I like about it is that you have